April 7th, 1943, a date carved into the heart of the Pacific War. The morning sun had barely risen above the Solomon Islands when the U.S. Navy launched its aircraft from the decks of carriers, slicing through the ocean mist like blades of steel. Among them was a young pilot, Lieutenant James Elm Sweat, calm, precise, and quietly fearless. He wasn't just flying a machine. He was carrying the weight of countless lives, the hopes of a fleet, and the silent trust of his comrades who knew that the sky that day would decide more than just victory or defeat. Sweat had always believed that flying wasn't about daring, but discipline. While many pilots saw the sky as a battlefield, he saw it as a living, breathing system, predictable only to those who respected it. Every dive, every turn, every burst of gunfire had a rhythm, and Sweat had learned to hear that rhythm through the roar of his engine. When his plane lifted off that morning, the sea below shimmered like a mirror of fate, reflecting both fear and courage in equal measure. The Japanese had launched a massive strike against the American fleet near Tulagi. Waves of Aichi D-3A dive bombers, escorted by Zero fighters, were closing in. The air was about to ignite. Sweat's squadron was ordered to intercept, a handful of men against a storm of enemies. Yet there was no hesitation. They knew what awaited them: chaos, fire, and the razor's edge between glory and death. As Sweat climbed to altitude, his vision narrowed to pure focus. The world fell silent except for the steady hum of his Grumman F-4F Wildcat. Suddenly, specks appeared on the horizon. Enemy planes, dozens of them, glinting like shards of glass against the sky. He adjusted his throttle, checked his guns, and whispered a small prayer not for survival, but for precision. Then he dove. The first target came fast, a bomber lining up for its run. Sweat fired in short, controlled bursts. The tracers sliced through the air, tearing into the enemy's fuselage. Flames erupted, and the bomber spiraled into the sea. No celebration, no cheer, just another breath, another decision. He pulled up, rolled, and engaged the next. Within minutes, the sky turned into a vortex of twisting trails and explosions. Sweat's Wildcat darted between them like a ghost, silent and deadly. In a span of mere minutes, he shot down one, then two, then three bombers. His ammunition ran low, yet his resolve only grew stronger. His squadron was outnumbered, their radios filled with desperate shouts, but Sweat stayed calm, calculating every move, every turn, every shot. Then came his fourth kill. A Japanese dive bomber tried to evade, banking sharply left, but Sweat anticipated the maneuver, cut across its path, and unleashed another precise burst. The bomber disintegrated midair, a burst of light against the blue void. He should have retreated. Logic said it was enough. But war doesn't listen to logic. A fifth enemy appeared, bearing down toward the fleet. Sweat's heart pounded. His fuel was running low, but he couldn't let it pass. He dove again, closing the distance until the bomber filled his sights. Another burst, another fall of fire. The sky was now a graveyard of smoke and courage. By the end of the battle, Sweat had single-handedly destroyed 7 enemy aircraft in a single mission, a feat so extraordinary it would echo through history. But in that moment, he didn't feel victorious. His plane was riddled with holes, his hands trembling, his ears ringing from the constant thunder. Yet he brought his Wildcat back home, landing on a deck scarred with smoke and silence. When he climbed out of his cockpit, sweat and soot streaked across his face, but his eyes, those calm, steady eyes, reflected something deeper than triumph. They reflected the truth of war, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move through it. James Elm Sweat didn't see himself as a hero. He saw himself as a pilot doing his duty, one man holding a fragile line between chaos and order. The medals, the praise, the recognition, they would come later. But that morning in April, the only thing that mattered was the sky, the fight, and the unspoken promise that as long as he could fly, the enemy would never reach his fleet alive. The world would remember the number, 7 planes downed in one mission. But the real story wasn't about numbers. It was about discipline, precision, and the quiet strength of a man who refused to yield when the world above the Pacific turned into hell. When the guns fell silent over the Solomon Islands, and the smoke cleared from the horizon, James Elm Sweat sat alone beside his aircraft, staring at the shattered propeller blades that had carried him through fire. Around him, the ocean shimmered as if nothing had happened, calm, endless, indifferent. But for him, the sky would never look the same again. That April day had carved his name into the history of aviation, yet to him, it felt like both a triumph and a burden. 7 kills in one mission, a record of precision, discipline, and survival. But every victory had a shadow, and Sweat knew it. In the weeks that followed, he became a symbol for every young pilot who dreamed of the sky. His feet spread through naval bases like wildfire, not as a story of glory, but as a lesson in focus under chaos. Sweat didn't just fight, one of his fellow pilots once said. He calculated. He waited. He acted when everyone else froze. That was his gift, the mind of a strategist in the heart of a warrior. The Navy awarded him the Medal of Honor, the highest recognition a soldier could receive. But when the medal was placed around his neck, his expression remained humble, almost uneasy. Reporters asked him how it felt to be a hero. He answered quietly, "I was just doing my job." Those words revealed the essence of James Sweat, a man who measured greatness not by fame, but by duty fulfilled. The war dragged on, and Sweat continued to fly. Each mission brought new challenges, rough seas, mechanical failures, the endless uncertainty of whether the next flight would be his last. Yet he never allowed fear to take hold. His discipline became his armor, his calm a shield against the chaos of battle. He mentored younger pilots, teaching them that survival was not about bravery, but about precision. "Don't chase the fight," he would say. "Make the fight come to you." It was this philosophy that turned rookies into survivors. But even legends are human. In quiet moments between missions, Sweat often thought of the men who never came back. The laughter that once echoed across carrier decks grew quieter as the war pressed on. Victory, he realized, always came with a price. And it was never just paid in lives, but in memories, in silence, in the faces that haunted the dreams of those who survived. When the war finally ended, the Pacific skies grew peaceful again, but for pilots like Sweat, peace felt unfamiliar. The thunder of engines that once defined their world was replaced by silence, a silence heavy with ghosts. He returned home to a country eager to move forward, but he carried within him the weight of 1,000 skies. For him, heroism was not about celebration, but remembrance. Years later, when he was asked what kept him alive that day in April 1943, Sweat didn't mention luck or instinct. He said it was understanding. War, he explained, isn't about anger. It's about knowing your enemy, your aircraft, and yourself. That mindset, cold, analytical, yet deeply human, defined his entire life. Even after retiring, he would sit by airfields, watching younger pilots take off, his eyes following them with a mixture of nostalgia and quiet pride. In his final years, when journalists revisited his story, they expected grand words, patriotic speeches, maybe even regret. But Sweat remained the same calm voice he had been in the cockpit. "We didn't fly for medals," he told one interviewer. "We flew so the men on those ships could see another sunrise." That line, simple yet powerful, became one of the most quoted reflections in aviation history. When James Sweat passed away, the world saluted not just a war hero, but a man who had mastered the impossible, controlling chaos without letting it consume him. His legacy wasn't written in books or museums alone. It lived on in every pilot who took to the skies believing that courage is not loud. It's quiet, measured, and focused. The sky, for him, was never about domination. It was about harmony between man and machine, between instinct and intellect, between survival and sacrifice. And though time moved on and generations changed, the story of that April morning still echoes through history. The story of a young man who rose into a sky of fire, faced impossible odds, and returned with proof that precision could be stronger than fear. A man who never called himself a hero, yet defined what heroism truly means. James Sweat didn't just fight a battle in the air. He fought for the soul of every pilot who would ever look up and believe that courage begins not in the heart, but in the mind.